Look at these words. They were written 425 years ago, and scholars agree they're written by the hand of William Shakespeare. It's a forgotten play about the Renaissance humanist and Lord Chancellor to Henry VIII, Sir Thomas More, the author of Utopia and this guy in Wolf Hall. Scholars agree a number of writers contributed to the work, but the main speech was written by William Shakespeare in an attempt to get the play stage ready. And it's a speech about a very modern problem we face today: immigration. Because the questions about how we are to view the stranger, from intriguing to exotic to dangerous, have always been there. But this play about Sir Thomas More was never performed. In fact, it was actively suppressed by the censors and wasn't even published until 250 years later by a group of scholars. And there's no record of the play ever being performed until 1954. So what does the greatest writer of all time have to say to us about immigrants? I'm Dr. John, and this is Culture Decoded, where I take a weekly look at culture and try to tease out meaning. And the reason I wanted to make this video is that I believe that Shakespeare is at his most powerful when he reaches across the ages and speaks directly to us about the kinds of issues and problems that we face today. You don't need me to tell you that immigration is a hot topic today. So let's decode Shakespeare's forgotten play about immigrants. The forgotten play about Thomas More is set 8 decades before Shakespeare's time, when England's economy was booming, and traders from all across Europe were welcomed by the king to settle in London, set up shop, and most importantly, to pay taxes. Local traders became increasingly concerned about the competition that the newcomers gave them. Anger boiled over, and on May Day of 1517, a riot broke out. Thousands of angry protesters looted immigrants' shops, shouting abuse at those that they termed the strangers. Evil May Day has since become known as a violent xenophobic riot. The army was called in, and the under-sheriff of London at the time was Sir Thomas More, and he confronted the rioters near St. Paul's Cathedral and attempted to calm them. We don't have More's original speech, but we do have Shakespeare's version of it at the heart of this banished play. I'm going to break down the speech in full, but first we need to understand, why was Shakespeare writing about Sir Thomas More and his speech to the rioters 80 years after it happened? During the later part of Elizabeth I's reign, England's economy was in a slump. Years of the war with Spain had taken its toll, and religious turmoil in mainland Europe caused many refugees to seek a safe place to live in England. With immigrants coming from France and the Netherlands, London was again at crisis point. 80 years after the evil May Day riot, the Crown again welcomed the newcomers, but tensions among the locals were beginning to rise again. At this moment, across the desk of the Royal Court Censor Sir Edward Tilney, a manuscript came about a play of the evil May Day riots with Shakespeare's speech in it. Fearing that the mere dramatization of the riots would lead to new riots in the capital, Tilney took the manuscript and wrote across the front page, "Leave out the insurrection wholly and the cause thereof," and gutted of its pivotal moment and its main speech, the play was doomed. So what does Shakespeare's character of More have to say to the anti-immigration rioters? Let's watch the speech as performed by McKellen, and then we'll break it down.
The strangers should be removed! Grant them removed! And grant that this your noise hath chid down all the majesty of England. Imagine that you see the wretched strangers, their babies at their backs, with their poor luggage plodding to the ports and coasts for transportation, and that you sit as kings in your desires, authority quite silenced by your brawl, and you, in wrath of your opinions, clothed. What have you got?
The phrase "chid down the majesty of England" accuses the rioters of scolding or reproaching one of the key attributes of majestic England: its capacity to show compassion and tolerance. Here we have the juxtaposition of the refugees with their babes in arms, dressed in rags and poor luggage, in marked contrast to the rioters themselves, who are pictured as kings, proudly wearing ruffs and finery, who have benefited from the ability to live and trade freely, and more importantly, to have a freedom of opinion and expression.
I'll tell you, you had taught how insolence and strong hand should prevail, how order should be quelled, and by this pattern not one of you should live an aged man, for other ruffians, as their fancies wrought, with self-same hand, self-reason, and self-right, would shark on you, and men like ravenous fishes feed on one another.
So what lesson had their comparative privilege taught them? That as kings of their own opinions, they had come to view their symbolic power as real power, that it gave them the right to rule with arrogance, and, lacking as they are the self-awareness to see that they are also ruled, and by their standards could easily fall prey to a bigger fish, sharks even. The word shark is interesting here. Who is the biggest shark in all of England? Shakespeare is offering them an introduction to how it is to rule with monarchic power. It's not to do so with strong hands and iron fists, as many of his history plays have shown.
You'll put down strangers, kill them, cut their throats, possess their houses, and lead the majesty of law in Liam to slip him like a hound. Oh, desperate as you are, wash your foul minds with tears, and those same hands that you like rebels lift against the peace, lift up for peace, and your unreverent knees make them your feet to kneel, to be forgiven.
The majesty of law in their hands is slipping like a dog in mud, unable to be the steady force of wisdom that's needed. The law is often figured as a woman wielding a sword, balanced on a ball and blindfolded, in an attempt to show the impartiality of the law. But in the hands of these rioters, the law has become a snarling, snapping dog slipping in the mud, likely to bite any hand in an attempt to steady itself.
Say now, the king, as he is clement, if the offender mourn, should so much come too short of your great trespass as but to banish you. Whither would you go? What country, by the nature of your error, should give you harbour? Go you to France, or Flanders, to any German province, Spain, or Portugal, and anywhere that not adheres to England? Why, you must needs be strangers. Would you be pleased to find a nation of such barbarous temper that breaking out in hideous violence would not afford you an abode on earth? Whet their detested knives against your throats, spurn you like dogs, and like as if that God owned not, nor made not you, nor that the elements were not all appropriate to your comfort, but chartered unto them. What would you think to be thus used? This is the stranger's case. And this, your mountainish inhumanity.
Having portrayed the rioters as inexperienced and vengeful monarchs, Shakespeare now has more depicting them as strangers themselves cast into a foreign land. If faced with the same violence, they too would become unhoused. And but for the fortune of birthplace and circumstance, they too are the stranger, hoping for clemency and the safety of a peaceful residence. Central to this speech is the question, how are we to see the stranger? Throughout Shakespeare's work, we have different and complex representations of the foreigner. This reflected the Elizabethan and Jacobean contradictory views about strangers. At some points, citizens were warned to be fearful of the bloodthirsty Spanish, or intrigued about the newfound people of the Americas. They were charmed by the erotic poetry about the exotic Indies, and yet warned about diluting their religious or civic loyalties by exposure to different cultures, ideas, and values. Often, the presence of a foreigner forced people to confront new questions about how they see their place in the world. If England was a castle, the presence of foreigners could cause English people to worry about cracks in the walls and rumbles in the foundations. As one critic said, the mere presence of the foreigner serves to reveal the flaws of the host. And the fact is that the English government at the time both welcomed strangers and was fearful of them. Shakespeare used these contradictions and anxieties in his plays, from The Tempest, where exotic and alien life forms confront the stranded travellers, to The Merchant of Venice, where otherness is embodied in the vengeful and exacting alternative ethics of Shylock. But it's in Thomas More's forgotten speech that Shakespeare was at his most transparent about attitudes toward the stranger. And here, his voice is unequivocal. He flips the approach from a legal one to an ethical one. It becomes a question of ethics. Do not forget their humanity. Rioting, threatening violence, these are the actions that risk demoting human beings down to subhuman objects, from being humans with problems to being the mere problems themselves. This is the crucial crime against the humanity of strangers that Shakespeare is calling on us to consider. So here are my 3 main points, takeaways from this speech. Number 1, fears about a growing immigrant community are not new. Concerns about identity, otherness, the stranger, whose intentions might be hard to assess, a feeling that something is being taken from you. These have all happened to people before, and they're not new. Number 2, whatever your views on policy, never lose sight of the humanity of the immigrants themselves. They are human and deserve respect. We don't know their individual stories, but they will all include their own fear of the unknown and their worries about being accepted, and often with terrible injustices and trauma. And number 3, be mindful of the hypocrisies involved in prejudice. We are all earth dwellers trying to make a life for ourselves, and we would be a stranger in their land were we forced to make that journey. And the idea of a nation and nationhood is an imagined concept that does not exist in the natural world, meaning that we should never place the imagined idea of nation and nationhood above the real and imminent reality of a person's humanity. For Shakespeare, despite anxieties about immigration and otherness being acknowledged, the greater evil is to negate the humanity of the stranger. So what do you think? Which literary expressions of immigration and otherness most impress you? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next Wednesday for another episode of Culture Decoded.